My name is Margaret, but everyone calls me Grandma Maggie. At 72 years old, I thought my past was buried deeper than Jimmy Hoffa himself. I was wrong. The courtroom in downtown Chicago was stuffy that Tuesday morning in March. I'd come to support my grandson Tommy, who'd gotten himself into a bit of trouble with a DUI charge. Nothing too serious, just a young man making stupid choices. I figured my presence might show the judge that Tommy came from a good family. I settled into the hard wooden bench in the third row, adjusting my purse and smoothing down my floral dress. Just another grandmother in a sea of worried family members. That's all I was supposed to be. When they called Tommy's case, I watched my boy stand before the bench with his public defender. The judge, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, began reviewing the file. Standard procedure. Nothing unusual. Then he looked up. Our eyes met for just a moment, but I saw it happen. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the gavel. For 10 long seconds, the courtroom fell into an eerie silence. "Your Honor?" Tommy's lawyer prompted. "Are you all right?" Judge William Harrison, I could see his nameplate from where I sat, cleared his throat and fumbled with his papers. Yes, let's proceed." But his eyes kept darting back to me. And I knew. After 43 years, someone had recognized Maria Castellano. You see, Maria Castellano died in 1981. At least, that's what the newspapers reported. The FBI made sure of that. They had to, after what I'd done to the Torino crime family in New York. I was 29 then, married to Vincent Castellano, no relation to Paul Castellano, though people always assumed. Vincent ran numbers for the Torinos in Little Italy, and I kept the books. It was supposed to be simple, clean work. Family business, they called it. Everything changed the night of August 15, 1980. I was working late in the back office of Torino's restaurant, balancing the week's collections, when I heard voices from the dining room. The restaurant was closed, but Anthony Torino often held meetings after hours. I usually minded my own business, it was safer that way. But that night, I heard a name that made my blood run cold, Sarah Mitchell. Sarah was my sister. She'd moved to Chicago years earlier, trying to escape the family connections back east. She was a nurse, married to a good man named Robert, with 2 little kids. She had nothing to do with any of this. I crept closer to the door and listened. The nurse saw too much at the hospital, Anthony's gravelly voice explained. She was working the night shift when they brought in Carmine after the warehouse incident. She heard him talking before he died, mentioning names, locations. "We can't risk it." My hand flew to my mouth. Sarah had called me just weeks earlier, shaken up about a patient who died after being brought in with multiple gunshot wounds. She'd said he kept mumbling about wanting to make things right before he passed. "Make it look like an accident," Anthony continued. "Car crash, maybe. She drives that stretch of highway every night after her shift." I backed away from the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. Sarah. They were going to kill my sister. Back in that Chicago courtroom, Judge Harrison was struggling through Tommy's hearing. He kept stealing glances at me, his voice shaking as he addressed my grandson. "Mr. Morrison," he said to Tommy, "given the circumstances, and your clean record, I'm inclined to be lenient." Tommy's lawyer looked surprised. This judge had a reputation for being tough on DUI cases. "Community service," Harrison continued, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. 200 hours, and mandatory counseling. Case dismissed upon completion. Tommy turned around, grinning, but I wasn't paying attention. I was watching the judge, and he was watching me. When court adjourned, I knew I needed to get out of there fast. But Harrison was faster. "Mrs. Morrison," he called out as I reached the corridor. "A word, please?" My grandson was already outside, probably calling his friends with the good news. We were alone in the hallway, just me and the judge who'd recognized a dead woman. "It's been a long time. Maria." I looked around, making sure nobody could hear us. "I think you have me confused with someone else, Your Honor." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. August 18, 1980. Federal Courthouse, Southern District of New York. You testified for 6 hours straight. You brought down the entire Torino organization. My legs went weak. "Billy Harrison," I whispered, finally placing him. "You were the young prosecutor." He nodded. "I was fresh out of law school, assisting District Attorney Coleman. You were the bravest person I'd ever met, walking into that courtroom knowing you'd signed your own death warrant." The memories came flooding back. After overhearing the plot against Sarah, I'd made the hardest decision of my life. I called the FBI. Agent Patricia Wells had been trying to build a RICO case against the Torinos for years. When I walked into her office with Vincent's ledgers and my testimony, she knew she had them. But first, they had to save Sarah. The FBI staged the car accident themselves. Sarah's Honda found crashed and burned on Route 47 outside Chicago, her body supposedly too damaged for identification. They'd gotten her and her family into witness protection hours before the hit was supposed to happen. Then came my turn to testify. The trial was a sensation. Vincent sat in the defendant's chair, refusing to look at me as I detailed years of money laundering, loan sharking, and worse. Anthony Torino stared daggers at me from the gallery, drawing his finger across his throat when the prosecutors weren't looking. "You destroyed your own husband," Billy had said to me during a recess that day in 1980. "How do you live with that?" "He would have let them kill my sister," I'd replied. "I couldn't live with that." Vincent got 25 to life. Anthony and 4 others got similar sentences. The Torino family was finished. And Maria Castellano disappeared forever. "They told me you died in a car accident 6 months after the trial," Harrison said, bringing me back to the present. "Brake failure on the FDR drive." I nodded. "The FBI staged it. New identity, new life." I became Margaret Morrison, moved to Kansas City, met a good man named Robert. We had 3 kids, built a quiet life. And now you're here, 43 years later, in my courtroom. "Tommy's my grandson," I explained. "Robert passed 5 years ago. I moved to Chicago to be closer to family." Harrison was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know what happened to your sister?" "Sarah?" My throat tightened. The FBI lost touch with her family in the late 80s. "Budget cuts," they said. "I've been looking for her for decades." He smiled then, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him all day. "Mrs. Morrison, or should I say, Maria, there's something you need to know." My heart stopped. "What?" "Sarah Mitchell isn't lost. She's been right here in Chicago for the past 20 years. I grabbed his arm. "Where?" "She's a head nurse at Northwestern Memorial. Goes by Susan Miller now, but I recognized the name when you mentioned your maiden name was Mitchell during Tommy's intake interview. I've been wondering if there was a connection." The world started spinning. She's alive? Here?" "Very much alive. 2 kids became 5 grandchildren. She's been looking for her sister Maria for just as long as you've been looking for her. As I write this story now, it's been 3 months since that day in court. Judge Harrison, Billy, arranged for us to meet in his chambers the following week. When Sarah walked through that door and saw me sitting there, we both broke down. 43 years of thinking we'd lost each other forever ended in a single moment. She told me about the nightmares, about jumping every time a car backfired, about teaching her children never to talk about their grandmother Maria. I told her about the loneliness, about creating an entire new identity, about watching Vincent die in prison in 1995 without ever visiting him. We were both different people now, grandmothers with gray hair and laugh lines, shaped by decades of hiding and fear. But we were sisters again. The truly shocking part came last week, when Billy called me with news that changed everything once more. "Maria," he said over the phone, "you need to know something about the Torino family." "What about them?" "They're all dead or in prison. Anthony Torino was released 6 months ago. Terminal cancer, compassionate release. He's been asking questions, Maria. About you." My blood ran cold. After all these years, the past was catching up again. "There's more," Billy continued. "He knows you're alive. And he knows you're in Chicago." That's when I realized this story, my story, isn't over yet. It's just beginning a new chapter. And next week, I'll tell you about the knock on my door at midnight, and why I'm now packing everything I own into 2 suitcases again. What would you do if your past came knocking after 43 years? Some secrets are supposed to stay buried, but others have a way of digging themselves up.